Hi, Mr. Shapiro.
Howdy.
I'm actually the president of the College Democrats.
Well, thank you for coming, and thank you for co-sponsoring. I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming.
Now, quick question. Are you the guy who protested me outside, or are you the guy?
We were having a bake sale, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's...
Well, were the cookies good at least?
Yep, great
okay, good.
Cookies.
Fantastic. Were they legal?
Not yet. Give it time. So my question to you relates specifically to the transgender issue that you brought up during your speech. You cite the UCLA study and claim that it doesn't show in any way that suicide rates go down post-op. You say there's no evidence verifying this. However, during your speech...
Well, I said there's mixed evidence. I said there's mixed evidence about the drop in suicide rate.
During your speech, I pulled up the study on my phone as well as a bevy of other studies. Looking at research from the Karolinska Institute, from Berlin scientists, it actually seems to suggest, specifically the Berlin study, that suicide attempt rates drop from 26% to 3% in post-op treatment.
Right, so I've seen that study also. One of the problems with that particular study is it's not longitudinal. That study is only about like 1 year after the surgery. And what the statistics tend to show, at least according to scientists on the other side, right, is that you have to wait 10 years to find out whether the surgery takes or not, essentially. That there is an adjustment period. That, of course, you're really enthused in the year after you get a surgery that you feel you've been needing your entire life, but there's a readjustment period that happens. So, for example, here's another longitudinal study. This is a cohort study from Sweden. It was released in 2011 and covered sex reassignment surgeries from 1973 to 2003. So it's a 30-year longitudinal study, and it found that transgender surgery recipients were still 19 times more likely to die by suicide than the general population, and found that, quote, sex reassignment, although alleviating gender dysphoria, may not suffice as treatment for transsexualism. Right? So, as I say, there is mixed data. I'm not saying those studies don't exist. I'm saying I do find severe flaws in some of the studies that are cited. A lot of them are cited due to small sample size or not enough time in the longitudinal. Oh, yeah, you can follow up. That's fine.
Thank you. But specifically regarding the UCLA study, it actually suggests that when people are in supportive environments, their suicide attempt rates go down. You said that you do not believe feeding into their, quote, delusion will support them. How do you respond to the UCLA study you yourself use, suggesting that it in fact does? So
a lot of these, so I don't tend to believe self-reported studies about treatment, meaning that how people treat you. Questionnaire studies are not as good as behavioral studies. So the more important statistic from that study, the one that I usually cite, is the one about whether people can identify you as transsexual or as transgender or not. Right? If they can identify you as transgender, it's a 45% lifetime suicidality, suicide attempt rate. And if you are not identified as transgender, there's a 40% lifetime suicide attempt rate. Now, that doesn't mean that if people are mean to you, that your life isn't worse or that your suicide rate may not go up. Maybe it does. But I think that the evidence is not particularly strong on that score. And the level of bullying you have to really have some sort of third-party documentation as to the level of bullying, because there's also the significant possibility that people who are more likely to commit suicide are also more likely to feel sensitive to bullying that other people might not feel sensitive. Or have to be an omnibus. Really, it's an 18-page bill. If we agree on all of these very minor measures, then why not start with the minor measures upon which we agree? Why is it loaded up like a shopping cart with measures with which a lot of people disagree?
What do you think it's loaded up? We're going to get into transfers, right?
Well, yes. I mean, the definition. I don't want to get into the weeds because we talked about this earlier. But yes, the definition of transfer is incredibly vague in the bill.
So a couple of things about transfers on that. And one, this bill was modeled after Oregon and California, which have had...
Being from California, it's worked beautifully.
Which has had... hundreds of thousands of background checks, and there hasn't been one instance of somebody put in jail for a transfer. Secondly, the key thing on a transfer is that you have to knowingly circumvent the law. In other words, you have to be a black market dealer. Or otherwise, you're not going to be criminalized for it. That transfer issue is put in there to affect this individual to gun show. So gun shows are private sales. You can sell a couple of guns, but you had black market dealers that were selling 50 AK-47s a session against the law. Those people should have been, by definition, federally licensed firearm dealers. So it's designed at some point to prevent the bad guys from doing it. It's not a gotcha. Nobody wants gotcha for the average everyday citizen put in jail. And it will not happen that way because we have precedent in California and Oregon.
Well, it should be. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about the precedent in California California for a second? In California, there are 30,000 mentally ill people who have guns. They have a grand total of 33 people, really, in the state of California who are tasked with taking these 30,000 guns away from these 30,000 mentally ill people. Okay, we're creating a system that is either not going to be enforced or it's going to be over-enforced. This idea, if we can just trust the government, then why aren't we just trusting the government to do the right thing now? I don't understand why a piece of legislation makes them better at what they do. I mean, the government is not very good at what they're doing now. Why does new wording make them not suck?
Because part of the reason you have a law or initiative as a deterrent, that government won't even be involved, that the bad guys won't be going to gun shows to buy guns, so they have to circumvent it.
Well, but that's exactly the point. If bad guys are not going to gun shows with regard to Ebola, and for a second, this is a mild digression. With regard to Ebola, the federal government just made the case that they don't want a federal travel ban, right? Because they said if there's a federal travel ban, people will just find a way to circumvent the federal travel ban. Okay, do you see the analogy here?
Yeah, I'm not going there. I'm not going there. I'm here to talk about guns. And most people are law-abiding citizens on that. So, I think one of the reasons you have laws is a deterrent to make sure that people do the right thing.
Well, I agree, but this is the attendant cost. Right? If there are law-abiding, the cost is a law-abiding citizen, for example, under the bill, who wants to loan a gun to a family member for purposes of defending themselves. The bill talks about it has to be in the case only of the most basically emergency situations. Well, how does the government define that? It's undefined in the bill. Right? I mean, so I have a cousin or I have a sister-in-law who feels endangered by her husband. If I give her the gun and she says, I feel endangered, and she keeps it for a week, but the government only decides that she was endangered for 3 days, and the gun is stolen and used, then she can be prosecuted, I can be prosecuted, as well as the criminal.
And you'll never be prosecuted. It's never happened.
So again, it comes down to faith in government.
You'll never be prosecuted. There's precedent here. You'll never be prosecuted. Use your best judgment and don't knowingly break the law.
Then why don't we just pass a referendum that says, please, prosecutors, do good stuff?
I think that you have to acknowledge the reality, regardless of which end of the ideological spectrum you're on, that this idea that the relationship between a corporation and a worker is an entirely voluntary one is a figment of our imagination. The reality is that the relationship depends upon the balance of power. Because if you were to really believe that it's totally a voluntary relationship, then you should be arguing for child labor, because that was legal at one time, and that was argued as a beneficial thing for the economy. We have to understand that it's a balance of
away
power.
From whether we need customers with more money to have that base, but we'll be addressing some of the underage working here shortly. Ben,
yeah, I mean, I'll refrain from talking about child labor, especially given the fact that the rationale for child labor laws is that children are incapable of consent, right? I mean, that's the rationale for child labor laws.
Although your child did appear on television last night.
She did, without her consent, but I will tell you that she immediately joined SAG-AFTRA.
The rationale for child labor to be legal was that children are exploitable, more exploitable. That's why businesses wanted it, and people had to fight against it.
Businesses may want it, but the fact is that the children are not capable of consent, which is why the legislation was appropriate from all ideological points of view. In terms of whether basically this trickle-up economics, this idea that if you pay people $15 an hour, it will help the general economy, it's evidencing a differential point of view with regard to how money is invested and what makes your life as a consumer better. The truth is that Mother Teresa did less good for the world than Bill Gates, as a general matter. Because more people gained their jobs through Bill Gates, more people have a product that Bill Gates created, more people's lives have been bettered through Bill Gates. Mother Teresa did a lot of wonderful things. But the reality of the situation is that what makes your life better than people's lives were 50 years ago is all the new products and services developed by all the rich people who hire you. All of you out there who I'm sure are not rich, are you working for a poor person right now? Who is hiring you? Who's paying your salary? Unless you're working for the government, and even then you're not working for a poor person, you're paying for the rich people who actually pay the taxes that pay for you to work for the government. So this idea that economic growth is a function of people making $15 an hour versus $14 an hour is simply not true. The reality of the situation is that what makes the economy grow is new products and services that make your life better and which require millions of dollars in research and development. And as far as the point that was made about the salary of the CEO of Walmart, All I can say is this. See, the Walmart has approximately, they're the biggest employer in the country. They have something on the order of 2 million employees across the country. Let's say we agree that 20 million is too much. And let's say that we cut that salary to zero. Great, we just gave everybody $10, right, for the year. So let's stop pretending that the vast wealth imbalance inside Walmart is causing poverty for people at the bottom. And when, you know what? Explain to me. You explain to me why black kids aren't graduating high school. Explain that one to me. Explain to me why black kids are shooting each other in rates significantly higher than whites are shooting each other. Explain to me why 13% of the population is responsible for 50% of the murder. Explain to me why the number of black kids in prison, not for innocent reasons, not for walking down the street and getting pulled into a prison, is so high. Explain, if it has nothing to do with culture, explain to me why the single motherhood rate in the black community jumped from 20% to 70% in the same course of time that the civil rights movement has made such tremendous strides. Is America more racist now than it was in 1960? And if it is, please explain to me how that happened.
Anybody can jump in. It's an open mic there.
But there has to be racism. You can't say there's no racism.
Without evidence?
No. I'm just saying that I don't know which animal. Maybe we're talking about dogs or something. I'm talking about human beings, and I'm like, human beings are most likely going to have racial prejudices. I'm just so sorry. I'm just so sorry. I don't know. I don't come. I come from planet Earth.
Charles, I want to ask you a question. So your default is that when there is no evidence, racism is the deciding factor. That is
no, it's not saying that. I'm just saying that you're going to have sexists, you're going to have racists, you're going to have all this stuff. I mean, I'm just saying that.
I agree it exists, but the problem that I'm seeing, and this is the problem with the general conversation, is that there's no solution in simply saying there's racism out there. How does that solve anything? I mean, when you talk about there's institutional racism, what does that mean? Show me a law that is racist in intent, and we will agree. Show me a police officer who commits a racist act like we saw in South Carolina, right, where a police officer shot a black man running away and it was obviously unjustified, and I will agree. But you need the idea that you can craft a narrative based on no racism because it just must be somewhere out there in the ether, that doesn't solve problems for anybody and creates more problems for people because now they grow up in a milieu and an environment where they are told that every obstacle they face is from some shadowy, nameless, faceless group who's out to get them simply because of the color of their skin. They'll never succeed in that environment. On the Black Lives Matter idea, I want to find the people. I want to find the people alongside you who think Black lives don't matter. I'm still looking for those people. Really, I mean, like the implication is, of course, that for a bunch of people out there, for some reason, they're fine with black people getting shot in the street for no reason. Hands up, don't shoot was based on a lie. That's problematic. The idea that there is a huge number of black young men who are being shot for no reason by police officers is not statistically true. It's just not statistically true. The fact is that according to statistical studies at John Jay College, if you're a white man in a similar confrontation with police, you have a better chance of being shot by police than if you are a young black man. More white men are shot by the police every year in the country than young black men are shot by police in the country. The idea that there is a spate, and there's an easy proof. We know all of their names. We know all of their names. When there are 30 million black men in America. Okay, when we know all of, President Obama said that we have a spate, it's a slow rolling crisis. Once every couple of weeks we have a case that's under dispute. So let's take his statistic. Okay, so let's say it's 26. No, one is too many, and we all agree. But is it really a slow rolling crisis with a broad trend across the nation when there are 30 million black people in the entire country and 26 people are shot under disputed circumstances and probably at least half of those, the cop is at least justified? In Michael Brown, he was justified. Okay, and so basing it on falsities, you can't make a narrative on lies.
We're running out of time. I want to do a follow-up to New